Everyone in the village saw him as nothing more than the fat black farmer with a limp and a quiet smile. They whispered about his weight, joked about his slow steps, and dismissed his silence as weakness. But what they didn't know was that this man had once led missions deep behind enemy lines. That his hands, now calloused from plowing the earth, had once snapped necks in the dead of night. And when a gang of reckless thugs set their eyes on his land, they didn't just awaken a man. They awakened a ghost, trained by war, tempered by loss, and now unforgiving. There was a kind of silence in the village of Brie-Conque Robert that many found either peaceful or unnerving. An hour southeast of Paris, where concrete surrendered to cabbage fields and wheat stalks swayed like whispers in the wind, life moved unhurriedly. People there knew one another by the weight of their footsteps and the way their roofs creaked in rain. Outsiders rarely came, and if they did, they never stayed. At the far edge of the village, beyond the old vineyard and a rusted iron bridge, sat a modest farmhouse, modest not in size but in pride. It wasn't painted with charm or adorned with flowers. It stood sturdy, half swallowed by creeping vines, its shutters crooked, its wood weathered. But the land around it was honest, tilled rows of vegetables, a stubborn chicken coop, and trees that remembered war better than most men did. That's where Elijah Mbe lived. To the townsfolk, Elijah was a curiosity that quickly faded into routine. A big, slow, silent man who wore the same olive green coat no matter the season. A man whose belly hung heavy over his belt, whose feet left deep prints in the dirt, and whose face rarely broke into more than a nod. No one knew where he came from exactly, but they whispered Senegal, or maybe somewhere in Africa with war. Some said America. No one was sure. Children sometimes pointed when he walked past. He never minded. He didn't respond either. Just limped forward with his heavy boots, his wide straw hat shadowing a pair of eyes that had seen too much. His voice, if he even had one, hadn't been heard in months. He sold lettuce and leeks at the Saturday market. His vegetables were always the cleanest, neatly tied with string. But Elijah never haggled. If you asked the price, he pointed. If you looked confused, he gave it away. He didn't need to sell. He just liked growing things. The only person who ever spoke more than 5 words to him was Madame Picard, the butcher's widow who came to buy carrots every Tuesday. You should smile more, she once said. You look like you're carrying the war on your back. Elijah had simply tilted his head in a half bow and handed her an extra bundle. What the village didn't know, and never dared ask, was why Elijah's hands looked the way they did. Not just thick from work, but battered with old scars like rope burns and bite marks. His nails were clean, always trimmed with precision. His tools were stored in military order. The barn behind his house had a padlock newer than the hinges on the door. No one ever went near it. At night, he lit no lamps. But sometimes people swore they saw a single light flicker from the barn, or caught a glimpse of him standing outside, beneath the moon, still as a scarecrow, facing the woods as if listening to something only he could hear. One evening, 2 local boys on motorbikes tore through his field. They laughed as they trampled the outer rows of kale, leaving tire tracks in the soil. Elijah stood by the fence, watching. When they sped past him, kicking up dust and shouts, he didn't move. He just blinked once, slow and heavy. They didn't come back the next day. But something else did. A red mark sprayed on his gate. Just one word, fat. It was the first time in years Elijah was seen without his hat. He stood there, bareheaded, staring at the insult. He reached out with his gloved hand and ran his finger through the paint. Then, calmly he opened the gate, walked inside, and disappeared into his barn. By morning, the paint was gone. No one saw him scrub it. No one heard a word, but it was in that silence that things began to change. In the cafe near the church, The gang of troublemakers who had slowly taken to roaming the outer streets began to talk louder. They mocked him openly. Now called him Le Gros Mute, the Fat Mute. Said they'd teach him respect for not reacting. He's just some fat old immigrant with a shovel, said Remy, the sharp-tongued leader with slick back hair and a tattoo of a snake curled around his neck. We could take his whole land and he'd just stare like a cow. Elijah heard it all. Not through ears, but through rhythm, the change in the birdsong when scooters approached, the crunch of new boots on gravel, the shift in tone at the market when eyes averted faster than usual. He didn't react. Not yet. Instead, he planted more cabbage. He moved his scarecrow 2 meters closer to the gate. He began locking the barn before sunset, and inside that barn, behind a false wall covered in dusty tarpaulin and empty feed sacks, sat a large wooden crate. No one had opened it in over 10 years. But Elijah still remembered its contents by feel, every buckle, every clip, every trigger weight. No one in Breconk Robert knew that Elijah Mbai had once led a classified operation through Kandahar under the codename Spectre, that he could navigate swamps blindfolded, speak 5 languages, or survive 5 minutes without breathing underwater. To them, he was just a man who smelled like soil and grease, but ghosts don't stay buried forever, and some fields are planted with more than just seeds. The first real mistake wasn't the insult sprayed on Elijah's gate. It wasn't the laughter that echoed from the mouths of careless boys. It was what came next and how they did it. It happened on a Wednesday evening, just after the rain had stopped. Breconk Robert glistened in puddles and fading light. The air smelled of wet earth and diesel, and the frogs had begun their nightly chorus near the ditches. Elijah had just finished covering his compost with a tarp when he heard it. Engines, 3 of them, scooters again, louder this time. Closer. He straightened up slowly, knees cracking under the weight of his body. His eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in calculation. He didn't move to confront. He simply waited. The bike stopped outside his gate. Voices barked, laughter, then metal clanking. They were pulling on the latch. Elijah walked toward the house and stepped inside, as if nothing was happening. He closed the door gently behind him, not bothering to lock it. Outside, the gang broke the latch with a crowbar. It was Lino, the short, muscular one, who laughed as the gate swung open. "See? Told you the fat bastard wouldn't do anything," Remy said. "Let's make this place a bit more memorable." They stepped into the field with cocky struts, stomping over the cabbages, kicking rows of neatly planted spinach. Jamila held up her phone, filming them for what she said would be content. She zoomed in on Lino picking up a garden gnome and smashing it against a post. "Record this too," Remy said, pulling out a can of spray paint. "Time to mark our new territory." He walked up to the barn door and began painting across it, sloppy, aggressive strokes. Jamila laughed behind the phone as the word rats appeared, large and red. Inside the house, Elijah was sitting at his small kitchen table, drinking tea. Room was dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. His eyes didn't blink. The steam from his cup curled up like smoke rising from old gunpowder. Then came the second sound. Glass shattering. They had thrown a brick through his kitchen window. For a few long seconds, Elijah didn't move. A breeze rolled in through the broken glass, carrying laughter and the stink of spray paint. He stood in the yard. Remy lit a cigarette. "Yo, this guy's got chickens. You think he eats them raw?" he joked. Lino burst into laughter and started chasing one of them with a stick. Then they heard the barn door opened slowly, without a word. Elijah stepped out, not running, not shouting, just walking with that same limp and that same silence that had made him invisible to the town for years. But something in the way he stood made Jamila instinctively lower her phone. He didn't yell. He didn't raise a weapon. He only said 3 words, not loud, but clear enough for all 3 of them to hear. "You've gone too far." Remy blinked. "What did you say, old man?" But Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. Not a gun, not a knife, a silver whistle. He blew into it once, sharp and shrill, and the gang laughed again. Confused, "Who the hell you calling, the scarecrow?" Lino sneered, but from the tree line behind the field, something moved. At first, it sounded like growling. Low, guttural, heavy. Two shadows appeared, dark, fast and close to the ground. Dogs, massive ones. They bolted through the brush with terrifying speed. Black Belgian Malinois, trained for kill missions, each fitted with reinforced collars. Elijah had not just called pets. He had called war dogs. The gang didn't wait to see more. They ran. Lino tripped first, his shoe catching a vine as one of the dogs lunged past him and stopped short, barking furiously. Jamila dropped her phone, screaming. Remy tried to kick at one of them, but the dog dodged like a trained fighter and snapped near his thigh. "Call them off," he yelled. "Call them off." Elijah stood still, holding the whistle, unmoved. And then, as if on cue, the dogs stopped. Perfectly still, breathing hard, teeth bared, but waiting. Waiting for one word from the man behind them, but Elijah said nothing. He turned his back and walked toward the barn. The gang stumbled out of the field like rats from a fire. Faces scraped, jeans torn, their swagger gone. Jamila left her phone. She didn't look back. That night, no police were called. The town heard about it anyway. Someone had posted the video that had been accidentally recorded on Jamila's phone. The moment Elijah stepped out of the barn, the moment the dogs charged. A few hours later, it was gone, deleted. But not before it spread. The comments were instant. "Who the hell is this guy? Did you see how the dogs stopped? Like, military trained. That ain't no regular farmer." And just like that, the whispers. In Brie conked Robert, changed. No longer about his belly or his silence. Now they wondered what ghosts he had brought with him, and if they'd ever really left. The next morning, the village was buzzing. It wasn't official. No police cars, no press. But the video, now gone, had ignited something deeper than gossip. Fear, respect, curiosity. At the boulangerie, people spoke in hushed tones over croissants. At the town hall, someone pulled up Elijah's name in old residency file, only to find pages redacted and incomplete. At the bar, Lino's uncle muttered under his breath, "He's not French." Not really. That man's done things. But while the town speculated, Elijah was in his shed, sharpening tools. The two dogs sat outside, calm now, like statues, but their presence cast a shadow over the once laughable figure of the fat old farmer. Elijah had returned to work as if nothing had happened. He replaced the window, rehung the gate, and cleared the ruined crops. He didn't call the police. He didn't demand apologies. But every swing of his hoe carried a quiet intensity, as if digging through earth he no longer trusted. That night, a knock came at his door. He opened it to find the mayor, Madame Sylvie Chagnon, standing there with an air of forced politeness. "Elijah," she said, "we need to talk." He stepped aside, motioning her in. She sat stiffly at his wooden table, eyes darting around the simple home that smelled of rosemary and old wood. Elijah poured her tea. She didn't touch it. "I understand there was an incident," she began carefully. He said nothing. "The young people, Remy, Lino, they made a mistake. A serious one. But they are still children. They're grown enough to terrorize." Elijah interrupted, voice low. Sylvie shifted in her seat. "There's concern," she continued, "not just about them, about you. The video, it's gone now, but people are talking. They say you trained those dogs like a soldier." Elijah tilted his head. "And what do you say, Madame Chagnon?" Sylvie hesitated. "I say, we don't want trouble here. We don't want violence or fear." For a long moment, Elijah just stared at her. Then he stood, walked over to the fireplace, and took something down from the mantel. A small wooden box. He placed it in front of her. "Open." She did. Inside lay a folded American flag, a rusted military dog tag, and a photograph of Elijah in Navy SEAL uniform, standing in front of a helicopter, holding the leash of a war dog. Behind him, a unit of elite soldiers. Sylvie looked up, breath caught. "You think I trained them to be violent?" Elijah said softly, "No, I trained them to protect, just like I was trained. In deserts, in jungles, in places the law never reached." She closed the box slowly. "But why come here?" she asked. "To this quiet place?" His gaze drifted out the window, toward the orchard beyond the field. "Because I lost everything there," he said. "A wife, a daughter, all for flags that don't feed you when the war is over. This place was supposed to be my peace." Sylvie's voice softened. "I understand. No," Elijah said, sharper now. "You don't. I wanted no more blood. I just wanted to plant, to raise animals, to walk without remembering who I used to be." He leaned closer. "But peace isn't given. It's kept. And when kids show up with bricks and spray paint, when they test how far you'll bend, that's when you remember. You're still a soldier." Sylvie left without drinking her tea. 3 days later, a stranger came to the village. He wasn't local. Dressed in a sleek suit, sunglasses at night. He parked his black BMW near the cafe and asked for directions to Elijah Bay's farm. The waitress recognized the American accent. That same evening, Elijah was stacking firewood when the car pulled up. He turned and stiffened, not in fear, but in recognition. "Commander Ruiz," he said. The man smiled. "You still remember?" he replied. They shook hands, firm, old warrior to old warrior. Ruiz stepped into the house like he'd been there before. He glanced around, whistled low. "Hell of a hideout you've got here. What do you want?" Elijah asked, sitting. "We saw the footage," Ruiz said, "before it got pulled. And some of the boys back home, well, they want you to know you're not forgotten. I left that life, I know. But some enemies don't forget. And when word gets out that a SEAL went ghost in a French village, people start asking why." Elijah's jaw clenched. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" Ruiz hesitated. "No, but I'm saying your peace might not last forever." He reached into his coat and placed a folder on the table. "Just be ready, and if you ever need backup, you know where to find us." Ruiz left that night. Elijah didn't open the folder. Not yet. He sat in the dark, lit only by the orange glow of the fireplace. The dogs curled at his feet, twitching in their sleep. Outside, the wind had picked up, and far off in the distance, someone's motorcycle engine roared again. It happened on a Friday night. The sky was thick with clouds, swallowing the stars, and the fields around Elijah's farm shimmered faintly with dew. The quiet had returned in recent days, too quiet, almost rehearsed. The village pretended nothing happened, but Elijah knew better. The stillness was just the breath before the storm. He was feeding the chickens when the electricity cut out. The coop light flickered, then blacked out. The house behind him fell dark. The dogs perked up instantly, ears stiff, noses to the wind. Elijah froze. They were coming. He didn't need a camera. He didn't need confirmation. His instincts, carved by years of ambushes in the desert, told him everything. He whispered one word in Wolof. The dogs vanished into the night, ghosts between the trees. From the corner of his eye, he spotted shadows moving through the orchard. 5 figures this time, all masked, all carrying blunt objects. One had a crowbar, another, a metal chain. They thought he was alone. They thought they'd catch him unaware. Elijah stepped calmly back toward the house, slipped through the side door, and moved through the darkness as if he'd memorized every creak and board. He reached beneath the stairs and opened the hidden compartment. There was no gun, He hadn't kept weapons since Senegal. But there was something else. A pair of black tactical gloves, a folded combat vest, and a worn military baton etched with the Seal Trident insignia. He closed his eyes, took a breath, then moved. Outside, the intruders circled the barn. One of them whispered, "He's probably sleeping. We just smash up some stuff. Show him who's boss." Another chuckled. "Old man's probably hiding in his bed." That's when they heard it. A low growl. Close. The first scream rang out seconds later. Two of the intruders fell to the ground, knocked over by massive black dogs with jaws like steel traps. One managed to kick free and run, straight into Elijah. The young man swung his crowbar. Fast. Elijah ducked, grabbed his wrist mid-swing, twisted, crack. The crowbar fell with a thud. The attacker screamed, now holding a limp arm. "You came back," Elijah said coldly. "Wrong move." Another rushed in with the chain. Elijah stepped sideways, caught the chain mid-air, and yanked hard. The man stumbled forward, and Elijah drove his elbow into his gut. The thug dropped, gasping for air. Two more remained. They tried to run. Too late. The dogs herded them like wolves, growling, snapping at their heels, pushing them toward the open field where Elijah stood, backlit by moonlight now breaking through the clouds. One of the men, shaking, removed his mask. It was Remy. His face was pale, lips trembling. "Please," he begged. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone." "We were just what?" Elijah asked. "Trying to scare an old man." Remy nodded frantically. Elijah walked toward him, slowly. "I've seen real monsters, boy. You're just a child playing villain in a village too small to hold your ego." Remy dropped to his knees. I'm sorry. "Please don't kill me." "I don't kill," Elijah said flatly. "But you should ask yourself why you thought I might." The final thug was already lying on the grass, too frightened to speak. Elijah looked at them both. "Crawl back to whatever gutter spat you out. If I see you near my land again, I won't be so gentle." And then he whistled. The dogs retreated instantly, disciplined, focused, loyal to the end. Elijah turned and walked back toward his house. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. By dawn, the village had heard everything. Again. But this time, the story wasn't about Elijah, the fat farmer. It was about Elijah, the ghost soldier, the man whose land even fools feared now. Remy and the others left town. Rumor said one of them joined the Foreign Legion to prove he wasn't weak. The mayor returned to Elijah's farm a week later, not with warnings, but with an apology. "I was wrong," she said. "About you. About everything." Elijah just nodded, accepting it, but not needing it. She looked around. "What are you going to do now?" Elijah looked out toward the orchard, the trees. Tall, strong, unbothered by the storms. "I'm going to plant," he said quietly, "and wait for spring." It had been a month since the second ambush. The village of Bricant Robert was quieter now, but in a different way. Not out of indifference, not out of fear. This quiet was respectful, like the hush inside a chapel. People no longer looked at Elijah with suspicion or mockery. Instead, they looked away when he passed, unsure of how to apologize for years of judgment they never voiced aloud but always carried in their eyes. But Elijah wasn't looking for apologies. He wasn't angry anymore. He was tired. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to rest, to sit on his porch with a worn book and hot tea, letting the dogs lay by his feet. The scars on his knuckles had begun to fade. The pain in his shoulder, the one injured in a mission in Kandahar, was back, but he didn't mind it now. It reminded him he was alive, still capable, still standing. Then, one day, a visitor arrived. Not the mayor, not a neighbor. It was a young boy, no older than 12, riding a rusty bicycle. His name was Jules. He lived with his grandmother too. Streets away, the boy handed Elijah a small lopsided wooden box. "I made it," Jules said nervously. To say thank you for what you did, for keeping us safe. Elijah opened it. Inside was a carving of a dog, a house, and a tree. Crude, but honest. Pure. He looked at the boy. Thank you, Jules. That means more than you know. Jules scratched his head. People say you used to be a soldier. A really good one. Elijah smiled faintly. I was, a long time ago. Did you ever save someone? Elijah's eyes drifted off into memory. A few, he whispered, but not all. Never all. The boy nodded solemnly. Well, you saved us. And just like that, he rode away, leaving Elijah with more comfort in that one sentence than he'd felt in years of solitude. Later that week, Elijah did something unexpected. He walked into the village's old community hall, a place he hadn't set foot in since he moved to Bree. It was a Sunday. The place was dusty, quiet, almost forgotten. He brought with him a folded paper. A plan. When the mayor saw him, she blinked in surprise. You're volunteering? He nodded. We have too many boys like Remy, and not enough men to show them another way. She stared at him, then at the paper. Martial arts classes? She read. Self-defense. Discipline? Discipline, Elijah said slowly, teaches fear. But control teaches mercy. She nodded, moved. I'll fund it, whatever you need. Soon, the first class began. Elijah stood in front of a dozen teens, some of them sons of the same men who once scorned him. They were loud, cocky, skeptical. He said nothing for the first 5 minutes. Just stood, arms folded, watching them laugh and joke. Then, suddenly, he moved. In under 3 seconds, he crossed the floor, swept the loudest one off his feet, pinned him gently but firmly, then helped him up without a word. The room went silent. You laugh now, he said calmly, but someday, life won't be a joke. When that day comes, you'll wish you knew how to stand. The program became a success. Villagers came to watch. Children signed up. Even former skeptics began to nod at Elijah when they passed him on the street. The dogs no longer had to guard the property. The gates remained open during the day. The air was lighter. Still at night, Elijah would sit alone under the stars and speak quietly in Wolof to no one. To his wife, to the son he lost, to the ghosts that still followed him, even if he no longer feared them. One evening, Jules returned with his grandmother. She was frail but proud. I remember you now, she said, her accent thick. You were on TV many years ago. The mission in Fallujah. You carried that wounded boy out of the fire. Elijah nodded, surprised. That was a long time ago. Heroes live in the present too, she said gently. He looked at Jules, now practicing high kicks with focus and laughter. I'm no hero, Elijah said. But deep down, for the first time in decades, he started to believe he was something close. Bree conked Robert. On an overcast autumn morning, the golden leaves rustled outside as the wind whispered through the trees surrounding Elijah Mbaye's farm. The sky was heavy with clouds, the scent of damp earth lingering in the air. Inside the old stone cottage, Elijah sat at his wooden desk by the window, staring out at the fields he'd tended for years now, calm, safe, and golden like the sunrise he'd never stopped chasing. On the desk, a steaming mug of black coffee, a weathered pen, and a blank sheet of paper. For almost an hour, he didn't write a single word. Then finally, he began. To the one who finds this, or maybe to the future version of myself. My name is Elijah Mbaye. I am 58 years old, a farmer by choice, a warrior by necessity, a survivor by fate. I was born in Senegal, but I have bled in countries whose names I still cannot pronounce. I served in the U.S. Navy SEALs for most of my adult life. I buried my family after a war that never touched them directly. I buried my name when I left it all behind. But this letter is not about war. This is about what comes after. This is about what happens when a man tries to trade vengeance for vegetables and scars for silence. I came to this quiet village hoping to disappear, hoping the world would forget the blood on my hands and just let me rot into the soil. Instead, the world sent me a test. It came with broken glass and knives and fire disguised as boys playing gangsters, and I passed, not because I destroyed them, but because I chose not to. Elijah paused. Outside, the dogs barked at a squirrel, then quieted again. The wind shifted. The sun broke briefly through the gray. He smiled faintly and returned to the page. To the boy reading this, maybe years from now, I know what it's like to be angry, to feel overlooked, to feel like power only comes from fists or fear. But I want you to hear this. Real power isn't what you can do to others. It's what you choose not to do. I could have ended those boys. I could have painted this soil red, and no court would have judged me for it. But judgment isn't justice. And I didn't come here to survive, I came to heal. When I trained as a SEAL, they taught me how to enter a room and take down every soul inside. But no one taught me how to sit with grief. No one taught me how to plant hope in soil poisoned by loss. I had to learn that on my own, with my hands, with the earth. With time, he set the pen down and stared at the photo resting by the edge of the window. A younger Elijah, laughing, his wife beside him, their son on his shoulders. They were gone now, but not forgotten. Never forgotten. He picked up the pen again. So if you've lost something, or someone, or yourself, let this be your permission to start again. Plant something, fix something, teach someone. Don't let the worst thing that ever happened to you be the only thing people remember. He folded the letter slowly, gently, like he was tucking away a prayer. He slid it into an envelope and wrote in bold letters across the front, "To be read when I'm gone." He walked into his bedroom, lifted a loose floorboard, and placed it inside a metal box. The box also held his SEAL badge, his service medal, a broken pocket watch, and the last drawing his son ever gave him. He covered it all back up, then sat down quietly on his porch, watching the sun dip beneath the fields he had saved with his bare hands. Weeks passed. Elijah continued to train the kids. Jules came back every day, now stronger, more focused. Word spread. Teens from neighboring villages came, not just to learn how to fight, but to learn why not to die. He taught them all. Until one day, he didn't show up. There was no warning, no goodbye. They found him on his porch, asleep in his chair, coffee cup beside him, eyes closed, mouth slightly smiling. Gone. Jules, now a young man, discovered the letter. He read it aloud, voice trembling. To a room of students in the dojo Elijah had built from scraps. They wept, they clapped, they renamed the place Way, a place where lost boys could become whole men, a place where strength met compassion, where fists were trained only to protect, not to dominate. And beneath a large mural painted by every child who had ever learned from him, Elijah's words were etched in stone. Real power is what you choose not to use.